Welcome back to the channel, returning fans, and a massive hello to all our new listeners. Today, the world as we know it ends, and a terrifying new story begins. Let us witness the transition. The creature sprung into view with a blinding flash, hovering over the terrified crowd. Someone finally exclaimed the name of the myth. It was a Dokkaebi, a goblin-like creature from ancient Korean folklore. Dokja looked around, sweat trickling down his face as realization dawned. He did not know why that specific sentence popped into his head at that exact moment, but his heart started racing fast. The commute home turned into a nightmare in an instant. The subway came to a sudden, violent halt, and the entire cabin grew dark. Fear began to spread among the trapped, confused passengers. Amidst the rising panic, a strange feeling washed over Dokja. Lines from a very familiar story kept crossing his mind. He tried to dismiss the thought, but the coincidences were becoming impossible. The woman beside him asked if it was really a Dokkaebi, her voice trembling with disbelief. It did not make any sense, but the reality of the scenario was now staring them down. Confusion turned into a heavy, suffocating silence. The people looked at each other, waiting for an explanation that would not come. Dokja realized he was the only one who knew what happened next. Realistically speaking, there was no possible way this could be true. It was completely impossible for a web novel to become reality, but the atmosphere in the train was shifting into something sinister. He looked at his phone, reading the description of a creature with 2 small horns and a straw garment. It was too peculiar for a fairy, yet too innocent looking for a devil. Suddenly, a flash of light erupted at the end of the dark carriage. Someone shouted for everyone to look as a mysterious, glowing entity manifested. The text he read was coming to life. The passengers began to murmur in confusion and fear, wondering what the floating creature could be. Dokja stood frozen, whispering that there was no way this could be happening. It was a fairy. The creature hovered in the air, its fluffy white appearance masking a terrifying power. This was exactly as described in the novel. To everyone else, it was a monster they called a Dokkaebi. As the passengers murmured in confusion, the world Dokja knew began to crumble. At that singular moment, the line between fiction and reality overlapped. The story he had read was finally coming alive. Dokja stared ahead, his eyes wide with a mixture of dread and grim recognition. He was no longer just a reader. He was a witness to the beginning of the end of the world. The Dokkaebi began to make strange, unintelligible noises, sniffing the air as if testing the environment. Its bizarre speech patterns were distorted, leaving the passengers even more baffled and frightened by its presence. People around him whispered, wondering if this was some kind of elaborate augmented reality prank. No one knew what was actually going on in that subway car, except for Dokja, the sole survivor. Dokja confirmed the truth to himself. This was the exact Dokkaebi that appeared in the opening paragraph of his favorite novel. This creature heralded a tragedy that would last for thousands of chapters. He squeezed his phone tightly, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. It felt impossible that the very same creature from the text was now standing right in front of him in reality. Beside him, Sanga wondered aloud if the creature was speaking Spanish. She even considered trying to talk to it, completely unaware of the grave danger they were all currently facing in this moment. Dokja quickly snapped at her, asking if she planned to ask the monster for money. He knew that whatever the creature was saying, it certainly would not be helping any of them survive. Suddenly, the Dokkaebi's voice became clear, claiming its language patch was malfunctioning. It asked if everyone could hear it now, just as a brave passenger stepped forward to demand an explanation for everything. A young man stepped forward, assuming this was all a movie set for his upcoming audition. He was impatient, completely unaware that the creature before him was not an actor in a costume. The Dokkaebi laughed, mockingly mentioning how its timing was perfect for the evening rush. It spoke of paywalls and customers, terms that made no sense to the frightened passengers trapped inside the subway. The creature told everyone to calm down and take a seat, claiming it had something important to say. The passengers only grew more frustrated, demanding that the train simply start moving again immediately. Angry voices rose up, demanding compensation and citing a lack of consent for being filmed. Even a small child pointed at the floating creature, innocently asking her mother if it was a cartoon. Dokja watched the crowd's growing anger with a heavy heart. He was certain of the impending danger. He knew exactly how this story goes, and he knew that their protests would soon end. Realizing the situation was about to turn deadly, Dokja knew he had to stop them. He reached out to Sangha, firmly telling her not to move, even as she looked at him confused. The Dokkaebi giggled, noting how noisy the carriage had become. Its playful demeanor began to shift into something far more menacing as it prepared to enforce its own cruel set of new rules. Suddenly, the creature's eyes glowed a terrifying red. Its voice boomed through the cabin, dripping with malice. It told them once more to be quiet, but this time it was a lethal command. A sickening splatter echoed through the train as the arrogant young man's head simply exploded. Blood sprayed across the horrified onlookers who finally realized this was no movie, but a true living nightmare. The body swayed for a moment before collapsing onto the floor in a pool of dark blood. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of dripping liquid and terrified gasps. A fountain of blood erupted in the center of the carriage, staining the clothes of everyone nearby. The horrific sight left the remaining passengers paralyzed with a level of shock and pure terror. The Dokkaebi's wide, toothy grin filled the air as it looked down at the cowering crowd. It mockingly confirmed that they were certainly not filming a movie, shattering their last hopes of safety. More screams rang out as another passenger met a gruesome end right before their eyes. The realization hit them like a physical blow. This was not a dream or a cruel prank anymore. Heads continued to burst in a rhythmic, sickening splatter. The Dokkaebi watched with a wide eye, making it clear that this was not a novel or a story they could just simply close. The creature loomed over them, shouting that this was not the reality they were all familiar with. Dokja held Sangha close as the monster demanded to know if they finally understood their situation. Dokja looked down at the floor, watching the blood pool around his shoes. He hated to admit it, but this was real. His lingering doubt and disbelief were slowly starting to fade away. The Dokkaebi's voice turned mocking as it noted how everyone had lived such cushy, comfortable lives until now. The passengers could only stare back in absolute silence, trembling with an overwhelming fear. It laughed, stating they had all enjoyed the privileges of life without ever having to pay the true costs. The creature's excitement grew as it prepared to introduce them to a brand new world. The creature's face twisted into a demonic mask of joy. It declared that their free ride was finally over. Nothing in life is free, and now it was time for them to pay. Panic flared as passengers squeezed together, their faces pale and eyes wide with desperation. They were trapped in a metal tomb, waiting for the next command from the monster that controlled their lives. A man suddenly stood up, his voice trembling as he asked the creature if money was what it wanted. He believed that his financial status could buy his way out of this nightmare. That man in the sharp, pinstriped suit stepped forward, his expression a mixture of arrogance and desperation. He was used to solving every problem in his life with a thick stack of cash. Dokja recognized the man immediately as Mr. Han from the finance team. Sangha confirmed his identity, noting that he was only employed because of his powerful connections back at the corporate office. Mr. Han reached into his pocket, offering as much money as the creature desired. He desperately asked if $1 million or even $2 million would be enough to secure his immediate release. The Dokkaebi tilted its head, sounding genuinely amused by the offer of human money. Mr. Han continued to rummage through his bag, certain that his wealth was the key to his freedom. The creature agreed that money was good, describing it as a mere agreement between humans. Mr. Han smiled broadly, foolishly thinking that his logic had finally won over the terrifying floating monster. With a sudden snap of the creature's fingers, the money in Mr. Han's hands erupted into a roar of flames. The paper was only valid within the narrow confines of their human spacetime. The Dokkaebi warned him that such paper had absolutely no value in the macroscopic dimension. It threatened to blow his head off if he ever tried a pathetic stunt like that again. The creature snapped its fingers again, declaring that there was no more time for idle chit-chat. It told the terrified passengers that their debt was piling up with every passing second. With a final swoosh, the Dokkaebi's horns began to glow as it prepared to launch the first true scenario. The time for talking had ended, and the time for survival had begun. A system notification materialized in the air, announcing that channel by 7623 was now open. The Constellations, godlike beings from the far reaches of the nebula, were finally making their grand, terrifying entrance. Blue holographic screens began to flicker into existence all around the cabin. Terrified passengers looked at the glowing panels, asking what they were. The digital sound of bells filled the entire subway. Some were paralyzed by fear, while others looked on with a dark, knowing smirk. The era of peace had officially ended. Every person in the carriage was now a character in a story. Dokja stared at the screen appearing directly in his field of vision. He was the only one who truly understood the weight of these blue windows. The first scenario was about to begin. A final notification appeared with a bright flash. The main scenario has arrived. Dokja's doubt was completely gone. He was no longer just a reader. He was now a participant in the apocalypse. The screen revealed the brutal mission: prove your value. To survive the next 30 minutes, they must kill one or more living organisms. The penalty for failure was nothing less than death. The Dokkaebi bid them good luck with a monstrous, wide-eyed grin. It stated that it expected to see an interesting story. The creature's eyes glowed with a sickening, vibrant purple light of anticipation. A blinding flash of light enveloped the entire carriage as the scenario timer began to count down. The survivors were left in a world where morality was now a luxury they could not afford. Thank you for watching. The story has officially changed, and the survival of the fittest has begun. What would you do to prove your value? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for the next intense episode recap.